All right, well, welcome everyone. We're glad that all of you are here today for the UNLV Virtual Summer Institute, our starter toolkit for serving justice impacted students. So my name is Sunny Gittens and I use she, her pronouns. I'm one of the co-chairs for the Justice Impacted Task Force. We're going to allow people to keep on joining us, but to get started, I have a few just announcements to make. First of all, I do want to share that this institute is being recorded. We'll make these recordings available after the institute to everyone, including we're using the closed caption feature for those recordings. Second, go ahead and keep your microphone muted unless you're presenting or speaking to the entire group. But please do keep your cameras on, as I know if you are wanting to do that, it's up to you. But I know it's sometimes helpful for presenters to be able to see some nonverbal cues when they're talking as well. And then third, if you have any questions, go ahead and enter those in the chat. So I will try and monitor the chat questions for the presenters. I know it's really hard to have your screen sharing and talking and looking at the chat all at the same time. So what I will do is I'll read questions to the presenters as time allows. And if for some reason we don't get to all the questions, then we'll make sure that there's some follow-up opportunities as well. And then you should have received a copy of the program booklet in advance that include information and the biographies of all of our presenters as well as the schedule. Now, there will be additional materials that we will send out towards the end or after the Institute as well. So first, I'd like to acknowledge all of the members of the UNLV Justice Impacted Task Force. And in particular, I do want to recognize Jason Scott. So Jason Scott's a PhD student and instructor in the Department of Sociology, who's persistently brought the challenges facing students that are justice impacted to the attention of administrators and faculty and staff. I would say Jason's been pretty effective at advocating that the cultural and structural barriers faced by students with a record of arrest, a criminal conviction, or formerly incarcerated is a social justice issue. And so it was after meeting with Jason Scott that Dr. Renee Watson, who's our Vice President for Student Life, recognized a void of services, mentorship, and advocacy for justice impacted students at UNLV. And Dr. Watson formed the Justice Impacted Task Force. So this task force has actually only been in existence for a little over a year. And as everyone knows, the pandemic happened right after the task force started meeting, which kind of redirected people's attentions for a short amount of time. But the task force did manage to come back together, and we've actually accomplished a lot in just 1 year. So the task force has been able to identify campus and community resources for justice impacted students and consolidated that information on our website. We've done outreach to students and postcards. I will say one of the greatest things is we've identified some key staff in different functional areas that can serve as a point of contact for students. And in particular, I want to thank Dr. Harriet Barlow as our executive director for the intersection, who's agreed to serve as the point of contact for students. And it really provides an amazing safe space for students to seek information and referrals. The task force has also been offering training for UNLV and faculty staff. So we've done about 40 presentations across campus, as well as a recorded presentation that's been made available to a number of faculty staff. So the goal of that has been to expand awareness of the cultural and structural barriers facing our justice impacted students. And though one of the things we've talked about as a task force is, of course, that training is a pretty introduction to serving justice impacted students. And we've been wanting for there to be some more in-depth information and a sense that not very many of us at the UNLV campus felt like we were experts in this area in order to provide more information. And so that's one of the reasons we're here now and have created this justice impacted institute. And so we were super excited that we have so many great presenters here for us. So for the task force, one of our desired outcomes of this institute is that we'll be able to use the information from this institute and feedback from all of you that are participating in the institute to develop an action plan. And I'm super excited as I've been looking at our registration for this institute. We have a variety of faculty and staff and students from across the institution that are participating in the institute. And so we're looking to use all of the input of those that participate. So take notes of your thoughts, and we will be collecting information from you after the institute. And then the task force will be meeting to try and develop all of this information into an action plan. I will also say one of the other great things that's happened within the task force is that Jason Scott took the initiative to apply and receive funds from the Minority Serving Student Institution Student Council. And so with these funds, Jason Scott has formed a peer mentor program for justice impacted students, and might well be one of the greatest things to come out of our efforts so far. And you'll learn more about those on our last day of the Institute, when you get to meet some students that have participated in the peer mentor program as part of our student panel. And before we get too far, I also really want to thank J.R. McMichael. J.R. is the Information Technology Coordinator for the Center for Academic Enrichment and Outreach. And it is J.R. that handled all this registration process and the Zoom technology for all this institute. So definitely very thankful for J.R. For doing all of that behind the scenes work for us. And so now, without further ado, I'm super pleased to introduce Jason Bell. So this gets a little confusing because there's two Jasons here, but so I'm excited to introduce Jason Bell. And Jason is the Regional Director of Project Rebound and a lecturer at San Francisco State University. And Jason's been an amazing source of information and support for the UNLV Justice Task Force as we've looked to launch initiatives and better serve our students. And Jason was gracious enough to offer to coordinate the 6-hour Justice Impacted Institute, and has been the one who actually pulled together the amazing team of expert presenters that you will see over the course of the next 3 days. And all of these presenters deserve our heartfelt appreciation, as they are not only taking the time to share their expertise with us, but they're doing so at no charge. I would say a true demonstration of their commitment to assisting those that are impacted by the justice system. And so, everyone, meet Jason Bell.
Hello, everybody. I know some familiar folks on this platform, but Sonny, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, University of Las Vegas, for allowing us to come and dialogue with you today. But I got to tell you, they slap all kind of titles on me, and I'm no longer the regional director. I'm considered the director of program development for the CSU consortium. So whatever that means, it's the enjoyment of the work that keeps me here. But so I do come to you today as an adjunct professor, criminal justice, as well as sociology, and in a long-time professional staff in Project Rebound, over probably 18 years of doing this work professionally. But even more importantly than all of that, I was a Rebound student. So when it comes to taking pride in being a living example of successful reintegration in a college setting, I gotta say it's a little more personal to me. And that comes from the philosophy of Rebound. So for our UNLV folks that may not be as familiar with Project Rebound, what it is, in a nutshell, it's a support network for folks who maybe have not traditionally seen themselves as college material. We advocate for them on their college campus from behind that wall until they get to the campus, and support them through that process. But it was birthed from a guy named John Irwin, amazing man. I got to know him personally. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2010, but he himself paroled from Soledad Prison in the 60s, and he wanted to go to school. He wanted to go to college. But the beautiful thing about him, where the agape piece comes in, is he not only wanted an education for himself, he was thinking about folks that he had left behind. And he wanted to create a platform, that safe space for people that needed it. And that's how Rebound was birthed at San Francisco State in 1967. So, but for the purposes of this workshop, I had to think long and hard. I put together a kind of a ragtag group of superheroes and sheroes, and they have an abundance of different expertise, like Sunny was explaining, and we just want to share those different experiences with you, and hopefully you can really kind of learn from our successes and some of the pitfalls that we've come across over the years. I mean, that's really the purpose of this work, and we do it, we enjoy it, and we live it. It's a natural thing for us to want to help others do the same. So hopefully we can do that for you, and please understand, like when things come up, jot them down, because I know this kind of dialogue creates, and we're not in face to face, so we can't just see hands raised and do that kind of dialogue. But please take note so we can get to them by the end of all of this. So I'm going to make it interesting. I'm going to get everybody involved a little bit, and I'm going to kind of show a little intro platform. Your only task really is to not get caught up in the groove and actually pay attention to the stuff that's presented to you, okay? Because there is a little quiz in the middle of this. So I'm checking to see if you weren't just dancing and missing the point. All right. Let me I can share this the screens, correct?
Yeah, you should be able to share your screen.
Can everybody see that? Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so folks, I'm gonna start off real easy. Can you pinpoint the justice impacted student in the lineup? Folks, I guess put it in the chat if they feel that they can do it. And then Sunny, are you kind of keeping track, because I can't really see everything right now.
Yep, I'll read off answers. We got trick question, they all are. One person said they can't identify them. Somebody else said could be any of them. Someone says all 5, could be anyone, all of them.
Okay. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. So people are not falling for the okie doke. And because a lot of times when I talk about demystifying the assumptions, you know, everybody doesn't look like the proverbial Bubba that you hear about oftentimes in TV shows and movies about formerly incarcerated people. It could be anyone, and you are correct. Every single one of them has justice involvement and are scholars as well. So I often run into that narrative, like, you know, who are these people? They talk about this group of people like they're this one unit, and that's not the case. So that was my point with that. So the next few scenarios, just kind of pay attention. I'm going to let it roll out, and I will definitely share this with you, Sonny, for folks if they want to see it again. But the next thing is going to talk about incentives for people behind the wall that are getting involved in higher education and that possibility of them wanting to transfer that energy to our campuses. And then a couple scenarios that played out with the I guess for lack of a better term, non-traditional students in the classroom. So just check them out. I know some people may have thought about them. Some of us are aware of these kind of situations, but others might not be. So that's what this is about. So I am back, but my point in showing that was to kind of lay out some scenarios that have played out in real time on college campuses that people do not think about. Well, I guess that wouldn't be in our traditional college going books or catalogs about the scenarios that could happen. And if anything that I would love to draw from this experience is certain things to stay away from. Like there's some instances that have stood out in my mind about us as educators, and I see us on a different level in many respects. I mean, a caring kind of a community that is aware of a lot of different things, but every now and then something like really, for lack of a better term, irks the hell out of me that comes up in the community. And recently, maybe a year and a half ago, there was a college program in California that was going in custody in Solano Prison. And there was a psychology instructor, professor, he was being goaded kind of to implement this, Psych 101 course. And in response to that request, what he said, when they proposed the idea, he said he was morally and ethically opposed to teaching psychology to incarcerated individuals, stating that the psychologist ethics board would be against it, and formerly incarcerated students couldn't become psychologists, so why waste our time? I mean, I could find a few things that bother me. Hopefully others feel the same way, but if anything, we want to just please, I think it's our duty to educate ourselves, to stay away from instances like that. And hopefully as we go forward with this work, we can prevent that. If anything, that's really what bothers me a lot is falling into the weeds with those kind of ideas about and impressions people have about the community trying to better themselves through education. So, and in light with that, I have another colleague of mine that has worked with me for many years on the San Francisco State campus. She is a professor in psychology herself, and a tenured professor actually, as well as a JD, who has done work in custody in San Quentin, been a part of starting some programs. But on top of that, she's worked hands-on with many of the rebound students over the years on campus. And she's been a long-term advocate for the SF State rebound. So Dr. Amy Smith, could you share some of that history with the community, please?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jason. I'm honored and happy to try to redeem psychology professors after that horrifying story. My name is Amy Smith. I'm a professor in the psychology department at San Francisco State, and I have had the honor and privilege of working with and learning from formerly incarcerated and system impacted folks for the last 25 years in a variety of different capacities. I wanted to share just a little bit about my background and experiences with you and share a couple of stories about why I am deeply committed to making college available to any system impacted person who dreams it. I first came into contact with the carceral system about 25 years ago as a law student. Standing in a gymnasium full of incarcerated men, I realized very quickly that all of the social justice work and spaces that I had been exposed to up to that point were leading me to the fight against this system. And so after obtaining my law degree and practicing law for a few years, I went back to school to get a PhD in social psychology with a focus on understanding the effects of legal structures and systems and the impact of incarceration and extreme sentencing on our loved ones and communities. What all of that education and research allows me to tell you is this: there is no better tool to reduce recidivism and improve outcomes for formerly incarcerated and system impacted students and their communities than higher education. Education, particularly post-secondary education, has consistently been shown to be the #1 most effective tool for changing the experiences of system impacted folks, both while they're incarcerated and post-release. It's been shown in study after study. Everyone from Michelle Fine at the City University of New York to the Vera Institute have demonstrated the robust effects of education. By closing some of those structurally imposed gaps in education levels, the opportunity to be in college has wide-ranging effects. And in particular, it is believed to improve outcomes for system-impacted folks by increasing three things: civic engagement, economic opportunity, and social networks. And so there's just no question from the research and the science that everything about supporting system-impacted folks in higher education makes sense. Even more persuasive to me, though, than that data are some of the personal experiences that I've had. In 2007, I had a chance to volunteer at San Quentin State Prison, and I saw immediately and directly the sort of impact that education could have. Together with a group of incarcerated men, mostly lifers or people serving life sentences, several volunteers and I developed a program to teach social, psychological, and social justice principles through experiential activities. On the day when the facilitators taught for the first time about procedural justice and the feelings of frustration that could be related to rules changing, for example, our participants were frustrated. They were angry. We had created in them, as planned, right, the feeling of that kind of inexplicable, unfair, arbitrary situation that many of them had experienced throughout their entire lives. The beauty was that in this context, we could quickly discuss and begin to unpack the things that they were feeling. Why a rule change resulted in a flare of anger. I knew well the reason that I wanted students to understand this, because understanding those things, I think, makes it easier to respond in a productive way to experiences we might have. So for example, waiting in line at the DMV, right? But I had no idea what it really might have meant and the possible impact that this understanding might actually have. In the discussion after the exercise, one of the men said, "If I had known what this feeling was before, I wouldn't have committed my crime." Sorry. My work at San Quentin is, to this day, I think, the most important work that I've ever done in my life. Luckily, my chance to work with system-impacted students and scholars wasn't limited to the inside. I started working with Project Rebound as soon as I got to SFSU in 2004. And students from the Rebound community have been in my classes since day one. Some of them will self-identify to me early in the semester. Some will share with me after they've heard me give a lecture that contains some signal to them that I might be a safe person. Some Rebound students I've taught, I don't realize until I see them walking across the stage at graduation with Rebound cords or colors. And doubtless there are many, many more system-impacted students I've had the privilege of teaching whose contact with the carceral system I will never know. Those students I am aware of, though, are some of the most dedicated, hardest working, engaged, and inspiring students in the classroom. It means something when you recognize the value of education and the opportunity that you have received. And people with that awareness act differently. They raise up everything around them. You know that student who brings up intersectionality in a class discussion and she brings the rest of the class along with her, right? You know that student whose voice, whose lived experience carries a different weight than anything you as a teacher have to offer. There are years, decades of Project Rebound students who are at the top of the class, award winners, outstanding graduates. Our Rebound students persist and have higher graduation rates than the general student population, and they're in the community, contributing, giving back. One of my former students who had done time in the California Youth Authority didn't see himself as a scholar. He didn't really think he should even be in college. He didn't think he was smart enough, good enough. He wanted to help other kids, but he didn't think he knew how or had anything to offer. And he didn't really believe me when I encouraged him to go ahead and apply to law school, if that was his dream. People had told him that even if he got in, he would never be able to get admitted to the bar. That student, Chris, is now a highly regarded defense attorney in the state of California, representing youth who are facing time, youth who see in him their own possible reflections of success. And the larger community also benefits from some of those students who may not be at the top of the class, not the standouts, but the quieter students, working hard, maybe even struggling to balance it all and get through. The changes we make to our curriculum, to decolonize our syllabi, or to use more inclusive language, those things help everyone. I think about a student who asked me to break down an assignment or technology into even more basic steps. That's universal design, right? Perhaps one person needs it to remove a particular barrier, but we all benefit. And if the last year has taught me anything, it is that we all rise and fall together. For the past 13 years, in addition to having the carceral system at the center of my professional life, I have also had a loved one in prison. My work as a volunteer inside the prison ended, and I traded it in for the status of visitor. Having an incarcerated loved one is a uniquely stigmatized, isolating, painful experience. And with more than 2 million individuals in prison in the United States today, there's no question that you have already all taught many impacted students who, without your even knowing, might drop everything to grab their phone when the prison phone system number comes up, cherishing those 15 minutes of conversations that cannot be recaptured if they miss the call. Students who save their $1 bills so that they can purchase a vending machine sandwich in a visiting room every weekend. The student who tries to write her final paper on the bus ride across the state to see her brother or sister, parent or child. Knowing that a university values people who have been impacted by the prison system communicates something not just to formerly incarcerated students. It lets a son know that he doesn't need to be ashamed of his father's experience, or a mom whose daughter is in the system know that the university values her just as much as anyone else. It communicates a set of values about race, power, pain, and redemption, values that, again, benefit everyone they touch. Prisons and universities in the state of California have a unique relationship to one another. Coming from the California State University, or the CSU system, my institution is nearly indistinguishable from the California State Prison System, or the CSP, on any state ledger, right? Historically, the CSUs and the CSPs in California even drew from the same pool of funding, their budgets in a constant tug of war. In some ways, they're the opposite sides of a prism, I think, both refracting light and sending that light out into the world. But from my perspective, this is where the similarities end. Because while prison breaks people, degrades them, puts them in cages, and does everything in its power to remove dignity, self-worth, autonomy, and choice, the university is designed to do the opposite. It's the place where most of us in education have been drawn in with the desire to build up, improve, nurture, and empower. Until we have a society in which systems are not designed to harm, what better way to serve our communities than to try to counteract some of that pain? Simply put, it's the right thing to do, right? It's hard work. It can be painful, heartbreaking, inspiring, exhilarating, but it's definitely some of the most meaningful work you'll ever do. I'm thrilled that you all are here this week to learn from some of the best folks in the country about how to effectively welcome, support, and celebrate system-impacted individuals into your classrooms and your university. And I'm happy to offer myself as a resource if there is ever anything I can provide to you along the way.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. And she has always done that, gone above and beyond to support us, to advocate for us on that campus. You know, she's shown me many things, and I definitely consider Dr. Smith a mentor in this work. So thank you for showing up and being a part of this today. So next, we want to slide into some things that are going on nationally. There's some efforts that are happening, and shoot, the conversation that we're having today, Sonny, with your community at University of Las Vegas is a part of that work. But I want you to hear some tidbits of information that are happening in Portland, in New Jersey, and also efforts from California to these different spaces. Could you share? Who wants to start off with that? We have at least 3 folks that can speak to that. First in line, Deborah, I see you on my screen.
Hi, yeah, I'm happy to jump in there, although that is, two tough acts to follow there. But hi, everybody. My name is Deb Arthur. I go by she, her pronouns, and it's an honor, really, and a thrill to be here with all of you today. I've heard so much already, and I feel like, in a Freire-esque kind of way, I'm the student, teacher, student. I'm learning as much already from you all as I could possibly have to share. So hopefully, we can all do that together. So Jason Bell is a mentor of mine and a friend. I had the opportunity to go down to San Francisco. I don't even know now, like I lose track of time, especially after the past year. It's all a blur, but I don't know, probably 8 years ago, I'm guessing, 6, 8 years ago, to go down and spend the day with Jason at San Francisco State. I had been researching Project Rebound, and I wanted to meet Jason and some of the folks around San Francisco State Rebound. And I've been trying really hard to get something going here at Portland State University. So I'm an associate professor at PSU. I teach in the interdisciplinary gen ed program at PSU called University Studies. And I'm a former criminal defense attorney. So I practiced criminal and juvenile law for 10 years before I came to PSU to teach community-based learning courses. And so, you know, connection with this system of mass incarceration and working to dismantle it has in some way been part of my work for over 25 years. It's looked different, but, you know, I do believe this is really one of the civil rights issues of our time. And so I've been teaching classes the entire time I've been at Portland State, partnering with Multnomah County Juvenile Detention, Multnomah County Department of Community Justice, the Juvenile Detention Center. And I have students at PSU who go in and do academic work with the kids in juvenile detention. Up till COVID, we've been on a pause. And I mean, that's a whole nother issue. It's a bit horrifying what's happening inside juvenile detention because things have really shut down. But until COVID, we were doing academic work with youth, helping them to get some high school credit and to start thinking about college. You know, having worked with youth for a long time and having a deep understanding of what happened in juvenile hall and juvenile detention in Portland, I knew that the education system in there was not great. And it's run by the Education Service District. And that's not to throw anyone under the bus. It's a really tough job. You have 18 kids, all trauma impacted in various levels, different credit retrieval levels. But I just kept feeling like, my gosh, for lack of a better term, we have an actual captive audience of teenagers. How are we not doing everything possible to make this the best learning experience of their life? Like, now's the time. And it just wasn't happening. They're just bored to tears in front of, you know, computer screens and handouts. And so we developed the partnership where PSU seniors went in and would do one-on-one, like individualized adaptive learning, academic work with kids, helping them to see that they are capable, that education is for them, and hopefully building a pathway to PSU. So that went on for some time. And then I started teaching at McLaren Youth Correctional Facility, which is the other, you know, the state side of that. And in Oregon, the youth facility houses people till they're 25. And usually the week before their 25th birthday, if they have more time to do, they get sent to DOC. And so I had a lot of 20-somethings that were high school or GED completion and started teaching college classes there. And, you know, brilliant, as you all know, you already know, brilliant students, and, you know, really love that work. And then, you know, it came to my attention that there were some higher education offerings for men in Oregon's adult prisons, but nothing in the women's prison. We have one women's prison in Oregon, and it's about 15 minutes south of Portland State, literally in our backyard. And so you know, that was unacceptable, that there was nothing happening for the women. And so I wanted to teach our first year gen ed year-long class, interdisciplinary year-long class, which is the way Portland State does its general education. And I pushed to be able to teach that at the women's prison. I was happy to find out that there was already a group of women, trans identified and gender non-conforming folks at the women's prison who were already organized to demand more access to education. So we met, there were actual tears, like the synergy was unbelievable. Let's do this together. And so, a steering committee from the inside and a steering committee on the outside made that happen. And so now we're finishing up our second year at Coffee Creek with building of a liberal studies degree pathway. And so I teach the freshman level of that, a year-long interdisciplinary course called Metamorphosis. And then we have had a number of other course offerings inside for the original cohort. So we're building the pathway as we go. And then, of course, the on-campus piece is essential. I feel like it's almost unconscionable to go inside and offer these courses, build this pathway, and not have that equal amount of support for folks when they come out. And so, we were able to cobble together some money to hire a college navigator a couple of years back. And then the need was overwhelming. The funding ended. I've been, it's like I keep telling people I'm a lawyer and all of a sudden I'm a teacher. And now I'm like in development and, I'm a grant writer and I'm a lobbyist, like all this stuff, right? Just do what needs to be done to make it happen. And so I'm definitely learning as I go, but I started knocking on all the dean's doors. Just showing up and making appointments and saying, like, this is a really important issue. 4% of system impacted people go on to receive college degrees, bachelor's degrees, 4% of formerly incarcerated students. Unacceptable. We talk about equity and inclusion. That's, such an important theme in higher education right now, but how can we be avoiding this particular population? 4%. So I'm knocking on all the dean's doors and they're all asking me, well, how many people would that impact? I think they had an assumption like, it's not really, there might be a few people on campus, but it's not a big population. And, they wanted the number. How many people are in? I said, I don't know. And we don't know because we don't ask and we shouldn't ask. We are lucky to have the common application that doesn't have the criminal history box on it. There's actually legislation in Oregon right now that would ban the box across all of higher ed, even private in Oregon. So I think that's going to pass. But so we don't really have that number. And so I did get a little bit of money to do some research to try to get at an estimate of that number to prove to the people with the money that it is a really important issue. And then COVID happened and that research kind of got slowed, stopped. It got stopped, but about ready to pick it up again right now. So, I feel like I just thrown at you, like, this is all the work I do. I'm learning as much as I have to share with you. I keep pushing this forward because, like I've heard, it's the right thing to do. It's win-win. It's not a matter of offering educational services out of the goodness of our heart to these poor folks who wouldn't have it otherwise. We need those students. As we've heard, some of the brightest and most talented students. And so our university also keeps, as many colleges, right? It's an issue in higher ed right now, keeps talking about low enrollment. People don't necessarily think of going to prison to increase their enrollment. But some of the most talented and brightest students that will have the problems that the future faces are there. And so I'm preaching to the choir. I keep making these pitches to all the people that hold the power and the purse strings around here. I have no power. I just have a big mouth and and a willingness to knock on doors and make it happen. So we do have a justice impacted student group on campus, which is fantastic. I've been able to work together with that group to, and it's a newish group, past couple of years, and it's still growing, but we've been able to hold some events and start to publicize that this is happening and it needs to be happening. So we're definitely making headway and trying to, have the on-campus services at the same time we build the higher education and prison program. So I think I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions when we get to that part. And thank you all for your passion and your interest in the work that you do. It takes all of us to make this happen, but it's a good time to be in this right now. The pendulum is swinging and opportunities are opening, and we just need to keep pushing forward. Thank you.
No, Deborah, that's extremely important stuff. And what you said, that we are constantly learning about things, because I don't know what I shared it with you, but you taught me something the other day with the group that you had, the student group that offered the online program. Because one thing about Rebound, true enough, we have 53 years at San Francisco State, and now there's 14 amazing campuses in the CSU that are doing that stuff. So I've gotten comfortable. I mean, we know that there's support. And so what your students taught me that night is what it's like in a place that doesn't have that support. Like the young student that paroled from the feds and had to ask for help for complete strangers, and they completely missed the point. All they wanted to know was, when she disclosed to them, was prison like Orange is the New Black. She's trying to get some help, and all they want to know is about nonsense. So I take for granted sometimes that we have that available. So I definitely learn all the time, and I like that you mentioned that.
Yeah, thank you. What Jason's referring to is we were able to have a panel of formerly incarcerated and justice impacted students who shared what their experience was like on the PSU campus. And we invited all, it was pretty well attended. I tried to get a lot of top level administrators there. They need to hear that this is real. And, one of the concerns was just not understanding the popular culture, even pronouns and misgendering people, because not even knowing that was a thing, and coming out and dealing in this world. So I want to say one other thing that I feel like it's super important to build the pathway, just like there would be for outside students, for any student. I have a 16-year-old who's starting to hopefully look down the road toward finishing high school. And I would not tell him to go take a random upper division class. I want him to start at the beginning and build his pathway. And it takes what it takes for people to dip their toe in. But once folks have decided that education is for what they want, there needs to be all the same opportunities as there are for any other student. And so that's something I feel strongly about too. Yeah, thank you, Jason, and everyone.
So in continuing along the lines of this national discussion and efforts, to push and expand the support, I want to jump back and forth. I want to go to California efforts supporting expansion in other states, and then shoot over to the East Coast and talk to my scholars from Rutgers. So Gunnar Johnson, can you share from Sac State, Rebound scholar there that's been doing some amazing work in helping expand some efforts in the state that Deborah is from, Professor Arthur is from?
Yeah, so my name is Gunnar Johnson. I work as an outreach coordinator for Project Rebound at Sacramento State. I'm also the reentry manager for the Insight Garden program, which is like a horticultural therapy program in 11 correctional institutions in California. So I'm finishing up my master's degree here at Sac State, and my goal was to transfer to U of O for the law program. I want to become a law student. While I was incarcerated, so let me start from my experience of being a student while incarcerated. I was incarcerated in the federal system for the better part of 18 years, from 1999 to about 2017. I was fortunate to take my GED while incarcerated at Lompoc Federal Prison, which qualified me for an AB 540 citizens, California residency waiver. So under the BOG grant at that time, Promise Grant now, I was able to get my education for free through Coastline Community College. I was one of about 20 people at FCI Sheridan, the Federal Correctional Institution in Oregon, who was actually taking college classes. The education department was solely focused on GED and some ACE, adult continuing education courses that were mostly facilitated by incarcerated people like me. So, we had a really good group of people that we studied together and we pushed through it. I was really intimidated by education initially. I took one class, wasn't sure how I do. When I was incarcerated in 8th grade education, I got my GED. But I did pretty well, and eventually earned an AA in social behavioral science. When I got out, I applied to Sac State, and I was denied because it wasn't an AA for transfer. I didn't have academic advising. I didn't have anybody that explained to me that I had to take these specific courses if I wanted to continue my education at CSU. And that's where Project Rebound came in. I called them on campus. I was frustrated. I just got denied. And they said, oh, here, we'll put together a plan. We'll tell you the courses you need for transfer. Help me continue my education now that I was out. I didn't know how to apply online, all that, FAFSA, all that stuff. They really helped me to hit the ground running after almost 2 decades of incarceration. So I started working with Project Rebound my second semester on campus as a student assistant, and eventually became an outreach coordinator. And in that capacity, I go back into correctional institutions prior to COVID and connect with incarcerated students. So I see the value in the work that we do. And when I was getting ready to transfer to Oregon, I contacted my federal judge up there, who was actually an ally now. Actually, I applied to get off of supervision early after a year. The prosecution was totally opposed to it. And I sent in like my transcript from college, and the judge granted it. And she was like, she's just become an ally and really supportive. And so I contacted her with a friend of mine who I was also incarcerated with at Sheridan, who's a U of O alum, and asked her if she would, through federal reentry court, maybe support a student-run organization at U of O that supports students with incarceration history. And she loved the idea, but thought we were thinking way too small. And so she called Carmen Fiora, she's also at Portland State and works with the Oregon Solutions Program. And Carmen was out on a bike ride and just pitched this idea of a program based on the model Project Rebound for the state of Oregon and what that would look like. And we had an hour-long conversation, and that was almost 9 months ago. And since then, we've had a bunch of meetings. Deborah's been in some of them. They've actually interviewed provosts or presidents of U of O, OSU, Portland State, and Southern. And universally, everybody's on board. We have people from Oregon Department of Corrections, Youth Authority, even education staff from FCI Sheridan, who see the need for it and the value in it. And there is this gap, unfortunately, in my home state, where, like Deborah mentioned, we have a lot of programs bringing in college programs inside, but no support if those students get out. And so how many of those students didn't complete their degree and got out and just, like me, didn't know how to even apply online, didn't know how to go apply for financial aid, all those little nuanced steps that some people take for granted because they've grown up in this technological age. That's something that's completely foreign to a lot of people that are impacted by the system. So where we're at now is really amazing. We have some legislative support. The proposals on the governor's desk. We have a meeting at 3 o'clock today. We've had 2 state senators who are on board, and it looks like it's going to happen. I mean, whether or not the governor signs off on it, we're going to be up there doing it. Oregon Solutions has actually got some funding outside of state funding, and this is going to happen. We're going to be on campus supporting our students with matriculation, and that's just, it's a natural evolution. We're behind as a state, and I know Deborah would echo that, but I know that we have a model to follow, and that's what Rebound's been doing the last 50 plus years in this state, and really outlined in what Danny Murillo just published, and I think we can build on that in Oregon. And one of the things that I like that we're doing up there is we've connected with a few of the community colleges as well. So we want to provide support, just not only in university, but in higher ed, but also in the trades. And for people that are getting out that want support going into the community college. And I think, it'll be a robust program once it gets up and running. And, we have a bunch of allies, a bunch of people that really believe in this. So if anybody has any questions, be glad to.
Thank you, Gunnar. We're definitely going to have questions, and Gunnar is kind of understating some of his other works. I mean, he's been doing, aside from expanding efforts in different states, pushing with Oregon Solutions and different organizations in a different state outside of California. He's also been hugely important for efforts in like that healing, what's it called, a restorative justice efforts, and he's actually
Yeah.
quite famous. He's, you
Oh,
know, he
thank you.
rubbed shoulders with Van Jones and some pretty big names to do that work.
Yeah. And what's interesting in that level, I know this isn't what the forum is about, but we've actually implemented some restorative processes in the parole board process here where I'm a survivor of violent crime, also a perpetrator of a very similar crime, what happened to me. I was shot twice and went through, you know, a victim of gun violence and also a perpetrator of gun violence. And you know, it's to be able to accompany survivors in this process that's really traumatic is important, and make the system more restorative as a whole. And we've been able to really do some systemic change in this. And now we have people accompanying people at the point of arrest because of DA Gascon in LA being an advocate and an ally. They're actually bringing in people that are trauma informed to accompany, you know, not only the offenders, you know, the person that has caused harm, but the survivor's family from the point of arrest, not 10 years after the crime, to try to start healing at that point, but at the incident. And I think it's really, we could transform the system if we start looking at it as, you know, we've made it so sterilized that the human element's missing. And so I think restorative justice will offer a lot of opportunities for people to heal.
And I have to admit, you definitely have made me a believer, because I didn't really believe in it, but you've shown me to really consider the huge possibility. I've seen that it happen in you and others because of that. So I appreciate you in those efforts. And then, so now I guess we got to shift over. See, the one beautiful thing about virtual space, we can jump from Cali to Portland to New Jersey. So let's jump over to New Jersey, Rutgers. A colleague of mine I've been working with for a while in the NJ STEP program, which was originally MVP, the Mountain View program. Their program is interesting too, because those efforts started from a not a formerly incarcerated person that actually knew John Irwin and has grown to be something pretty damn amazing in the state of New Jersey. Eric, can you share with us like what's going on with you and how things have grown and developed in your space?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Thank you, everyone who's been giving us some great info thus far. So my name's Eric Pereira. I am with New Jersey STEP. I can give you a little bit. So NJ STEP, we're a statewide program, so we operate inside and outside prisons. So we are in 11 of the state prisons in New Jersey, offering AA and 4 of them a BA program. And then we connect our students when they come home. We have community college relations, a person specific that connects everyone to community college throughout the whole state. And then we are the outside component, which is what we call Mountain View, which is in the umbrella of NJ STEP, which is very confusing, is on Rutgers. And Rutgers has 3 campuses uniquely positioned central, north, and south of a small state of New Jersey. So geographically, we're able to have one comprehensive program of higher ed in prison, which connects to outside on campus. So I'm an alum of the program. I'm formerly incarcerated. I took classes inside through NJ STEP, and I finished my degree on campus while commuting from a halfway house. And now I'm currently an employee, have been for almost 3 years now for NJ STEP. And I work on the outside component, specifically on campus at New Brunswick, which is our main campus at Rutgers, which is centrally located in the state. So a little bit about us, how we started, as Jason referenced. So Don wrote it. We actually, the outside piece on campus started before the inside piece. This is in 2005. Don Roden, this old Japanese history professor from Wisconsin. His mother was very passionate about going inside prisons and tutoring, and he picked that up as well. And he was already an established professor at Rutgers, tenured for a long time, and he was tutoring people in Mountain View. So Mountain View is actually a facility here. Is actually where I was incarcerated as well. So he, for lack of better terms, smuggled them onto campus, right? So it was not known, it was not a formal thing. It was really, he saw students who were going home and he was like, these students can excel at college. I'm gonna get them in. I know people. I'm gonna get them in the back door and do my best I can to help them succeed here. And this is pre-community, my job being filled by anyone. And we actually had, this is very important to note, we actually had a lot of failures, not failures, but we actually had a lack of success in terms academically in the beginning. A lot of students were dropping out because there was no support, there was no community. So that's really what I feel like I'm going to touch on the most here is the culture on campus and how we're able to, how the culture got created, but really how it's sustainable and moving our program forward. So one of the big changes that helped establish our presence on campus was, some of it, it was all mostly student led. So we had 2 students early on who got Truman scholarships, who were awarded Truman scholarships, which for those of you who don't know, I believe, don't quote me, I believe it's 1 student per state per year. And it was the first one any Rutgers student had gotten in decades. And we had 2 back to back. So that really helped put us on the map. And that in conjunction with our students, which were growing, even though we didn't have a lot of support and there was a lot of a lack of success in the beginning academically, formed their own student org. And this is before my time, so I'm speaking in the past. This is mid to late 2000s, first decade of 2000s, and formed our own student org, started having events on campus, and our presence just started growing with success and unity between our students, right? And then they started slowly growing. We started slowly growing allies on campus, a dean of non-traditional students, financial aid, certain professors, especially in the history department where Don Roden, the person who started the program, was housed in, right? So we started growing in terms of community support on campus, and it evolved into what it is today. You could go in almost any office on Rutgers, and Rutgers New Brunswick campus, a large campus, and even Camden and Newark. You could go in almost any office and say, I'm a Mountain View student, and they will know who you are. They will more than likely want to help you. And this is huge. This is really, you know, if we're saying what's needed on campus to allow formerly or currently incarcerated students to thrive on campus, we believe in the community aspect, and that's really what's helped us grow. So I could speak from my own experience coming to campus. There's an office, there's a home base, right? In Newark, we have a bigger office. I've been to Jason's office at Project Rebound. There's a big office with computer and people who have been in your situation. And if it's the first thing you see on a campus with 40,000 students and buses, Rutgers is complicated. There's four campuses just on my main campus, New Brunswick. There's buses going back and forth everywhere. Everyone's 19 years old, right? Very different culture. If you're coming home from prison, you're in your 50s, or you did 20, 30 years, and I have students who just came home during Corona who've never had a cell phone. And imagine going to campus and everyone's 19, right? Like, you guys know this. So our community is what gets us by. So they come to my office, they come to whoever was in my position prior, my director's there. We have a community. There's people, oh, you need this job, you need this, this is how you write this email, this is how you do your FAFSA, this is how you do X, Y, and Z. Anything is an open book. And this extends to, it extends beyond the physical meeting in campus, right? This is someone just came home, they have my phone number before they get the release. They call my cell phone number, and I'm formerly incarcerated, so I am welcome home. Let's talk about academics tomorrow. But usually that's not what they want to hear. Usually it's, how am I doing this? I got to sign up for classes. I got to do this. And I'm able to help them, and our whole team is able to help them from the jump. And that goes such a long way. It builds trust along with the community. And then the next step is really, how do we help them navigate all the barriers they're coming home to, besides academically. And I think a college campus can be a very, I don't want to say useful, a very good space for that, right? So we have connections with financial aid, we have connections with work study, we have connections with Princeton internships and various internships in New York and throughout the state. So we help to cover finances, right, as best we can. We help to cover employment best we can. We have some housing opportunities close to campus, which are not easy to navigate. That's a whole nother panel we could talk about. It's very difficult. But we have limited housing opportunities with subsidized housing, very affordable in the beginning. We have a bunch of alum now who have gone through this and are now in their fields, right? Succeeding, being leaders in their field. So we try our best to connect our alum to our current students, to help them navigate, is just to see light at the end of the tunnel. Like, this is a huge leap that students are making, even if they've taken classes inside, to come to campus. And like Jason, Jason, when you were showing that video before, I had a million thoughts of just my own experience and my students' experience, and when to divulge, or if, to their professors, to their, their fellow students. And it's completely their decision, but it's really how can we get you to do it? How's an easy way to talk through to do it? How have other people done it in the past? What can you gain from it? What may the possible results be when you do it? What's your reception going to be? How are you going to be able to deal with that? So it's really a bunch of things, but I would say the fact that we are in connection with our students as they come home is huge. So they have someone to call right away. Like, it's literally parole officer, family, us is the pecking order of and not always in that order of calls I get from students to and fro. So connecting from home to campus, and then the community we have on campus, is really how our students thrive. And now, we have been, but we are still working on the next sector in terms of preparing our students to be successful even upon graduation, which most of that comes from the opportunities that we were able to build as a program, but also as alum, for our students, such as speaking engagements and internships, fellowships around the country. This is part of the national movement, right? This is how our students are able to succeed. And also mitigating, this is huge, mitigating those barriers when they come home in terms of finances and housing. Like, the need is unlimited, and there's no perfect solution that is going to help everyone, right? Not yet, maybe, but we are more and more helping those factors as well, financially and housing, which really gives all of our students a huge boost, because that was a big portion of where our students were falling off. And we're strengthening that right now. We're on all 3 campuses out here. Like, any Rutgers campus you go to, there's someone like myself on campus. There's my media director, who is in charge of all of the outside for Mountain View under NJ Step. And then we have our executive director, Chris Agins, who a lot of you might know. So all this work in conjunction for the outside portion is really how we do it. So we have a big relationship with financial aid as well. So when scholarships are available, I'll get an email, I'll get a text message, who are Mountain View students in need of aid. Sometimes it really works like that. Sometimes if relationships foster into that, it can be that on the long-term portion of it, and that helps tremendously. So my role is, like Deborah said earlier, when she said campus navigator, academic navigator, like, that fits. My title is program coordinator, Mountain View counselor on campus. So I've been doing it for 3 years, and I love having someone formerly incarcerated in the role. It was not occupied by someone formerly incarcerated prior to myself. And the above and beyond the knowledge that I have, that I've been through, and being able to do little things. So I live close to campus. I'm able to drive, not myself, my partner, we're able to drive some students who are just coming home who need to go to the DMV, just other things that aren't even academic. Like, these things are what really is going to help your students succeed. These little things they'll never forget, right? And it's need. It's a genuine need that they have, that, how parole works, right? These are things we might not think of in academic setting on campus, but these things really are what gets everyone by. And we're in a position now where there's plenty of the connections we've made that we help our students, move along. So they talking about success when they graduate, that are trying to hire our students. There's a huge, the name escapes me, of a national community organizing group, but in New Jersey, it's NJ Together. And we've had some of our students graduate and work there and do amazing work. And now they're like, we want all of you, like, send us all your students. Like, we will hire them. They're making more than what I make, entry level. Like, it's a good job. It's community organizing. It's the perfect people for the work. So that's just one example of many opportunities that our students get. And another thing is time, I think, is something that I think about a lot, even presently. Going from prison and how you deal with time to coming home and being bombarded. This is another aspect of why being able to help mitigate all these barriers helps so much. and helps put in perspective, like, hey, we want to do our best to have you on campus, involved, part of the community, so you can really thrive here, right? Because if you have to work 2 jobs and take care of your family and pay rent, it's even if you got straight A's, it's hard to say, you know, in my role, I advise our students like you could get straight A's and do all that if, you know, you have to do it. I want you to be able to be here and make connections and do the internships and the work study and the fellowships and have a job when you leave that you want, and have connections, and have to turn down opportunities, right? So I could talk more about this. I'll leave Q&A for the on-campus portion, but I'll just leave you with, so we have now a couple numbers. We have over 100 students who have come home and graduated on campus in New Jersey at Rutgers, who were formerly incarcerated. And we have a BA program now inside that is booming. And I don't know the numbers on that. It's in the double digits, but we're growing inside and out. So however I could be a resource to anyone, please feel free to reach out and ask questions at the end. And thank you so much, Jason. I love the national connection. I love being able to help each other out. So thank you, guys.
You already know, anytime we can breach that bridge from the east to the west, I'm going to try to make sure it happens. And what's interesting about what you said, you described it as a movement, and I definitely see that. And a lot of people don't frame it normally from that perspective, but that's kind of important to do. And the fact that you pointed out things changed for you after that Truman Scholarship on campus. I remember that. I was there for those first few graduating classes before you had come aboard, when Dr. Roden kind of started it. And him, I mean, imagine that, a Japanese scholar, history scholar, getting involved in this work. Some people don't make that immediate connection, but it was the passion of that man that started that. He gave me a call and told me, I want to do this. I met John Irwin one time many years ago. I'm doing this work in MVP and at Mountain View Prison with these kids. I want to get this going on record. So we started, and it was for many years they were told to keep it quiet, and we understand that. And that kind of, when you described it as a movement, I use this term, the reasonable inclusion era. That kind of changed the game for a lot of folks, other people to start to recognize that the work became a little more sexy to a lot of folks. And then there also was money involved too. So that always helps incentivize a lot of folks. But that reasonable inclusion era started in California, specifically around after 2011, when that AB 109 realignment stuff started to change, and they got in trouble for all those overcrowded prisons. They had to start thinking differently about how to handle it. So that kind of changed the framework for all those narrow views with the politicians, some educators, legal practitioners, and other folks that were involved in creating solutions had to think about. So I use that term to describe that shift, and it takes that sometimes to get people to wake up and consider something different. But I'm glad that you're doing well, and anytime, like I said, I will always reconnect with the Rutgers team, and we used to come out once a year and see each other. They would come from there, or we would go there and hang out and make sure everything was running properly. But I'm glad to have you. Thanks for sharing that. So now for this third leg, I want to dig a little deeper into the prison to normally what you hear is framed as the school to prison pipeline. But what we're talking about more effectively with our work is the prison to school pipeline. And some of that happens, and a few people have mentioned it about the different organizations that start on campuses. I have some noted folks that have done that work, vigilantly, and done some pretty great things because of it. And now they're part of the consortium doing additional great things. So who wants to start first on your efforts as student organizers and what you've done for the community? Lily, you want to take it, or Dr. Martine, you want to take it?
Martine, you can go first. I can go after. All right.
All right. I'm trying to get my camera on. Good mid-morning to all of you. My name is Martin Leva. I'm a doctoral student at University of California, San Diego. Doctoral student in education. I have my master's degree in sociology. I'm a lecturer and also coordinator for Project Rebound at California State University, San Marcos. Definitely formerly incarcerated and have navigated this space. I'm going to share, I think tomorrow and as well as the Thursday that we're going to meet on a few of the things, but some of the stuff I'm hearing about today really, I'll probably reiterate in the next times that we do meet, but this work is super important to me because as somebody who never really grew up around, well, let me start. Always loved school, but I was misdiagnosed with some learning disabilities and I had ADD. I never knew what it was. That's what it was. So I was pushed out of high school in 9th grade. When I say pushed out, I always wanted to be there, but when I was there, I was in the principal's office. So I wasn't really in school, right? I was at the principal's office. And, you know, in being somebody who's been incarcerated for a majority of his life, upwards of 60% of people incarcerated have a learning disability. And it's super important that we note that because misdiagnosis, which still happens today, misdiagnosis of learning disabilities and you know, how we find our place in society. When I say I find my place in society, there's obviously a place where a lot of people who are in prison find their place in the streets and gangs, in and around, learning about our emotions through violence, through drugs, through alcoholism, right? Not learning how to manage our emotions. And then we end up in prison. We end up in jail. We end up basically, as Michelle Alexander would say, in a caste system. Right. And it's important to note that because 95% of the people who are incarcerated in the United States will be coming home someday. And this work became very, very important to me in 2004 when I came home from prison and they kept talking about reentry, right? Reentry. You're going to reenter back into society. What's that look like? And the thought is I'm reentering back into a society that really pushed me away in the first place. So what am I going to do? How am I going to survive? Because obviously I knew how to survive prison. I knew how to live that life, but that life didn't really give me anything, right? So lo and behold, there's education. I tried going to college. No, I didn't try. I went to college. But college was the most terrifying thing I'd ever done. When I first entered, stepped on a college campus, it was one of those things where as soon as I stepped onto that campus, there's a moment when I was like, I'd rather be back in prison than here. I had a biological response that I froze in place, not a feeling I'd ever really known. I was terrified. And back in 2004, there's Project Rebound, but I didn't know about Project Rebound, but there really wasn't anything in place in the state of California, especially with community colleges. And literally from that point, I needed a literal hand-holding. And thank goodness I had a niece who was going to the same school at the same time, and she literally held my hand through all the resources that I needed, from the admissions applications to financial aid to extended opportunities, programs and services, and all the services that one would need. Lo and behold, I said, you know what, I'm still scared to be up here. So I started bringing individuals I saw at the parole office to campus with me. I said, I'm here, you should be here too. It wasn't really because I, at the moment, cared about their education. I cared about my loneliness on campus. But that turned into a beautiful program that's been in place since 2008 called Transitions Program, right? And you know, I'll be sharing more about that in the coming days, but it's formerly incarcerated people supporting formerly incarcerated people, getting like-minded individuals involved. And, you know, and now that led, you know, my first intention to go to school was to get a certificate, or not even a certificate. I just wanted to get a job. You know, I got my high school diploma while I was incarcerated, but I just wanted to get a job. And I thought a job would save my life, which it would have. But then I began to realize that the stuff I was learning was very pertinent to my life growing up. I was in drug and alcohol treatment counseling certification program. I learned about family and family dynamics. I learned about the war on drugs and mass incarceration. I learned about treatment and treatment facilities and treatment plans and all this stuff, and it really pertained to my life. So I as a student, I centered myself around the education. And this is what I teach to my students who are formerly incarcerated. You know, I have the honor of teaching a lot of formerly incarcerated individuals in cohort models of education. That's the one thing I did create, was a cohort model of education for formerly incarcerated folks, where we're able to talk about the everything from the justice system, right? Our collusion within the system. We also talk about the importance of, you know, rational choice. A lot of times I heard throughout my life, like, I made the choice to do this and I made the choice to do that. But once I started learning through education about the system, I began to ask, well, if I made the choice to become alcoholic, who made the choice to flood my neighborhood full of liquor stores? That wasn't my choice. You know, if I made some choices, somebody else made other choices that it reinforced negative behavior. And education for formerly incarcerated folks and for incarcerated folks, I guarantee you right now, and as I mentioned, 95% of them are coming home someday, that we are solution-based. I look at Jason Bell as a mentor, as a friend, as a guide, and then everybody else from Project Rebound is here. I've been around thousands of people in my criminality. I've been around thousands of people, you know, on the streets and in jails and prisons, and even more so. And then I look at the hundreds of students that come into education, and it's a small percentage that come into education. And then I look at the even smaller percentage of us who become leaders. The leaders in Project Rebound, who many of them are here today, are solution-based. We want to do this work to create solutions, not just for the state of California, but nationally. We want to lead the charge and say, you know what? I was a product of my environment, but the environment has changed because the generation after me is going through the exact same thing I went through. And it's not fair to them. And we become those leaders. And so throughout the years, through our transitions program, we found at 3 different community colleges, the transitions program is ran through, right? 80% of the individuals that go through this cohort model of education do not return to jail or prison. A lot of them don't, a lot of them end up in higher ed. But one thing, and I've heard it here before, and I believe it was Eric who was talking about, education isn't just about a degree or it's about self-esteem and self-worth. It's about confidence, it's about communication, it's about learning who we are so that I can be a better father, better community member, a better son, a better uncle, a better human being, and also tackle the societal issues that continue to push people into prison. I always tell folks, prison is ready to accept you. You know what I mean? Prison is always ready to open its door and say, welcome. The day I left prison, I'm gonna stop right here, but the day I left prison, right, 2 things happened. They announced my name on the loudspeaker and said, Mr. Leyva, roll it up, you're going home. Right? As an indigenous male inside the prison system, I had my perceived enemies cheering me on, telling me to do good, welcoming my freedom and saying, please do well, don't come back here. Whites, blacks, Chicanos, all these people who were telling me, yeah, stay out of here. Over that same loudspeaker where my name was announced to go home, the guard said, hey, Leyva, we'll leave the lights on for you. I'm story-based. When that cop said to me that he'll leave the lights on me, he was right, because at the time, California state prison system was 79% recidivism rate. 79% recidivism. We're in the upper 60s right now. It's about 68% recidivism rate. So we're making progress, right? But that's still too high. That's still too high. we need to teach self-forgiveness, and the society needs to forgive us so that we can remain free. Mistakes happen, but we are solution-based, and we're here to provide solutions and guidance and support for many other marginal. I hope to someday say there is no more marginal groups, right? And that we look at incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people as capable of creating solutions. So I'll stop there. I'm gonna turn it over to Lily. And any questions we can answer in the end. Thank you.
Yeah, please, Lily, jump in there, and Tony, be prepared to follow up on that culture. And I think for folks that are in Las Vegas, it's important to know that these leaders, they represent different sections of California. We have the LA area, San Marcos, San Diego area, and then Tony is representing Humboldt, like the top of California. So there's when you talk about campus culture, there's a whole bunch of different things that are playing out here. So Lily, can you tell them about the journey, that crazy roller coaster ride?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Lily Gonzalez, and I am at Cal State Northridge. Cal State Northridge is one of the CSUs, one of 5 CSUs in Los Angeles County. And I say that because in Los Angeles County, we are also really great at incarcerating people, just like we are in the state of California. Ruthie Gilmore, a wonderful scholar, calls California the golden gulag. And we also know that in our LA County jail systems, right, there's over 17,000 people in there on an average day. And we also know that LAUSD is, a really large public school system here. So just looking at the incarceration numbers, looking at our large school district, it's like we know that there's kids in our system with parents that are incarcerated, and we know that our carceral system is very large. All that to say is with one of 5 being in LA County, it's like, how prepared are we to receive folks when they're coming home? As we know, programs inside are expanding and things like that, right? But that wasn't, and at CSUN, we're in a position where we are ready to receive folks as they're coming home, right? And they're coming home with those associates to transfer ready. But that wasn't always the case there. So I'm just going to back up a little bit and give you a little bit of just my personal experience and how I ended up in this space. So I came home in 2011 from Valley State Prison for Women, which is now a men's facility. And when I came home, I wanted to remember nothing about that experience. I threw everything out of the window as my brother picked me up from the facility. And I struggled a lot with employment. Back then, we didn't have things like fair chance hiring and beyond the box, right? So I went to an organization you may or may not have heard of by the name of Homeboy Industries. And the name says it, right? Homeboy, not a boy. So that just goes to show, right? Like, as it also relate, not only like do we have high numbers of incarceration, but when it came to reentry support for women, this was very marginal at the time and still so, right? When I was there, I started off as a part of the maintenance team and had no, like I mentioned, no aspirations of going into higher education. I was a single mom of 2 kids. I couldn't find employment. I went there to get a job. And their motto says nothing stops a bullet like a job, right? I mean, they've expanded to a more holistic approach, but that was my thing. I just want a job. I quickly realized that the more programming I took while I was there, the less time I would have to spend doing maintenance. So I signed up for something called Pathways to College. And while there, I divulged some information that I used to be in school prior to my incarceration. Again, no intention of going back into school. I was moved from the position that I was doing and I was placed into the cafe chopping chilies for salads. And at the same time, I had received my acceptance to Cal State Northridge. Again, I was supported by Homeboy Industries to even apply through their Pathways to College program because I didn't want to go. And once I was there, I chopping these chilies thinking like, wow, this is not it. My shift is 4 a.m. to 11 a.m. I have 2 kids, like, man, fuck these chilies, excuse my French, but at that same time, when I got my acceptance, I read an article about someone who was formerly incarcerated and pursuing their degree at Berkeley. And this person is Danny Murillo, which maybe some of you all may have heard of. But me reading that article of him being in higher education was really inspirational to me. And that's why, like Martin says, like sharing stories is what connect us and I feel is very important. once I stepped onto CSUN, right, it was a completely different experience. I didn't know about, this Wi-Fi thing, right? Before I had to like plug my thing up. Now there's like Wi-Fi everywhere. I have to print my syllabus, which is on my Moodle, which is like, what is this thing? So all of these things kind of came up for me. And at the same time that I learned about, Underground Scholars and Danny Murillo, I was like, how can I bring something like this to my campus? I became, eventually connected to Project Rebound. And as mentioned before by many folks on here, this wasn't something that was happening as in a silo. This wasn't something that was just needed at CSUN. This was something that was needed across the state, as we said, right, with our large numbers of incarceration. And this is something that we did as a community. On my respective campus, we started a student organization, which was led by formerly incarcerated students. And this was just to create the dialogue on campus because it wasn't happening. When I came to campus, I was like, where is Project Rebound? Can we get it here? And they're like, what? No. And because the campus wasn't really receptive to it at the time. They weren't really receptive to the fact that people with our backgrounds existed in silence. We have been on college campuses forever. Once that happened, we just became really adamant in discussing these issues, right? And letting folks know that we were on this campus. And so we started Revolutionary Scholars, a student organization with the goal of supporting folks that were previously incarcerated and ensuring that folks don't return to a carceral state by supporting them through their education. So as I mentioned, this is definitely a movement. It wasn't something that was happening just on our campus at Cal State Long Beach, at Cal State San Marcos, everyone was starting their student organizations. We all mobilized together to pass resolutions on our campus in support of our student groups and in support of Project Rebound. We also organized at the state level with the CSSA, which represents all the student body of CSU students. And we would road trip it to different CSUs that were having these meetings. We had one in San Francisco, and we all piled up in the same hotel room, right? Because we knew it was important to speak on these issues. And that's what we would do. We would caravan and try to support each other as much as we could. And like I mentioned, it wasn't just, establishing the student organizations, but it was also on our respective campus. It's like, what dialogue are we having about these issues? How are we understanding issues of carcerality and criminalization? What support systems do we have so that people don't return to those spaces? And so, like I mentioned, the culture wasn't exactly receiving at the time. I applied for a position on campus and was denied because of my background. And something in academia, right, that Deborah, you spoke to earlier, was the importance of the numbers, of the data, like show us the numbers. And so for us, it's like, when folks aren't really comfortable disclosing, how do we gather that information? So for us, we were able to make the case by showing the high numbers of incarceration in our state and the high numbers of incarceration in our county. And again, stressing the fact that not everybody wants to identify, but we have the space should they want the community. And I don't want to take up too much more time. If you all have any more questions, we can get to them also. But one thing that I did want to say is, as we talk about these things, our language is very important, especially as people in academia. Formerly incarcerated people are often the topic of research, but not the researchers. So as academics, invite that, right, with your students. Again, like I mentioned, this wasn't a silo. This was a statewide thing, but not just a statewide thing, a national thing. When we go to Beyond the Bars, which is a conference at Columbia University where a bunch of folks with our backgrounds come together, we roll deep and we make those connections. Like Eric, I know I've seen you there. So having that network is super important, I feel as well. And we're all connected. And I will just say one more thing. We were able to get our Project Rebound designation on our campus this fall. And with that, one of the things that the program requires is that they hire someone with the lived experience. And right away, when we submitted the position to HR, they flagged it. They said, no way, we're not going to hire somebody with a felony conviction. So that became a thing as well. Ban the box and all of these things are great, but if they give you those 10 days to kind of respond to you not getting the position, right? So we still had to navigate those things. And, you know, I will say one more thing about campus culture, right? So we started where the campus wasn't really receptive to folks, right, with this background on campus, but we've been mobilizing, doing the work continuously since 2016 when I stepped foot on that campus. Fast forward to now, in California, I'm not sure if at your university you have this, we have something that's like a code that says when the CSU makes any purchase, they have to go through Cal PIA first. And Cal PIA is an industry inside that is essentially slave labor. They force people to work at 8 cents, 10 cents, and then they want to come to our campus. They came to our campus, met with our director of procurement, and talked about how great Cal PIA was and the transferable skills that they provided and all of this stuff. There was a change in that code that says that government agencies the CSU is no longer required to purchase from Cal PIA, but they are encouraged. So we met with the director of procurement. We put together a paper on why this practice was exploitative and why we didn't support it, you know, on our campus. Like many desks, many dorm furniture is made inside. And we were able to pass a new policy on campus. And we're hoping that this happens across the board where because of the work that we've done and because of everything, right, it is no longer aligned with our values or our mission to make any purchase from Cal PIA. So CSun completely shut it down, and that is no longer happening. And that just goes to speak to like the shift that we have done where we were they were not really too sure. And now we have all of this institutional support where we were able to push this through. So that's all I have to say. I will, you know, drop the link to the Underground Scholars Language Guide in the chat box. I also have another report that was put out by Underground Scholars Berkeley. While we are talking about educational access, like, yes, that's important, but how also hiring culture. And we know that while, yes, folks are getting more degrees, that doesn't necessarily translate to more employment opportunities. So I will drop that in the chat as well as another chart that speaks to the rising rates of women's incarceration, which have gone to 837% in the last 40 years. And as a formerly incarcerated woman, I definitely have to bring that forth. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Lily. And I see you made some distinct connections between student organizing, with the resolutions, the professors all organizing between all the different groups, as well as collaboration between community colleges. I've heard from Martine. But now when we slide up to Humboldt State, there's a whole different level of kind of community connection that's taking place, and kind of share with them and close us out, Tony, on your history in Humboldt.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Super grateful to be part of this with some mentors, colleagues, and new faces. I'm going to start this off with a short land acknowledgement, how we up here we always present. I just want to acknowledge that Humboldt State University, where I reside just down the block, is located on the present and ancestral homeland and unceded territory of the Wiyot tribe. The tribes and nations in my county include Hupa, Karuk, Matol, Tolowa, Walaki, Wiyot, and Yurok. Half of my family and ancestors come from the northernmost island of Japan, Hokkaido, which is the ancestral land of the Ainu. And so I make this land acknowledgement and recognition that my words must be matched by action and approach. So yeah, super grateful to be here. Humboldt County is as far north as you can go. We are pretty much 5 hours away from anywhere. We're about 5 hours from San Francisco. We're about, I want to say about 7 hours from Portland. We're about in the middle there. So we're kind of in this redwood curtain. We're far away from pretty much anything kind of resource wise. So we also have the highest indigenous population in our county. HSU specifically has the most employed indigenous professors, staff, faculty, and this is all pretty much new throughout the years, and like everywhere else in the country, you know, we have the history of slavery, genocide of indigenous populations, but with our area, our disproportionate numbers of incarceration and poverty are indigenous populations that mirrored that of Black and brown bodies in cities. So I work closely with the Yurok tribe right now. We partnered up with them to kind of tackle these issues because it's very much needed. So I'm the programs coordinator for Project Rebound at HSU. I started the first ever club for formerly incarcerated students when I transferred to HSU. Very similar with like Martine and Lily. When I got up here, there wasn't anything for any formerly incarcerated students. There weren't any resources. And I was encouraged by some professors and the admissions team because actually at the time I was a journalist and I was writing a story on it. And so I kind of played two roles as a journalist. I wrote about the effects of incarceration in the area, as well as trying to start up resources for people with my experience. And so I kind of just like bombarded the county with, my activist work and then like my news articles to try and like kind of spread the word that way. And it worked out pretty well. So once we got Project Rebound on our campus, I started to work with our local recruiter in admissions, who's also a Yurok language specialist. He's also our native recruiter. So we have a couple of big programs that happen on our campus called California Big Time, which is a yearly event for all indigenous populations from California to Alaska to Nevada to the East Coast. We bring people in and have a big weekly event to talk about higher education. And then we have another one that is in November that brings in all youth within the state of California. And so what I found was our jail was disproportionately indigenous. Our juvenile hall is disproportionately indigenous. And if you go anywhere in the county, you see onto these reservations of just lack of resources that are here. Luckily for us, we have the Yurok tribal judge was the first indigenous woman to pass the bar in California back in the 70s. And so she worked in San Francisco for many years, and she has since retired and came up here to work up in Humboldt County. And so when I was starting Project Rebound, I contacted her and really I was very new to it and just said, what can I do with our program and how can we partner up? They have about a 13% literacy rate. They had problems with people coming back home from prison who were going back on parole violations because they simply couldn't read their parole stipulations. They had, they didn't want to admit that they didn't know what they could or could not do. And so they were literally getting sent back to prison because they couldn't read. And so my team and I was just shocked by that number, I shouldn't be with this work that we're doing, but I was still just, pretty flabbergasted by that. So now what I do is I'm on a bunch of committees with the Yurok Tribal Wellness Court, with their opioid specialist addiction committee, their youth incarcerated juvenile and delinquency committees, and where we kind of help bridge the gap of higher ed and tribal entities who from youth to adult who have been impacted by the system. A lot of them have, with youth specifically, are going through a wellness court, never really had higher education as any type of, opportunity presented to them, just like, many of us who've been incarcerated. And so we kind of bridge that gap. Today, I just got an email saying my staff and the Yurok tribe were just admitted to the 46th annual American Parole and Probation Association's Training Institute for an Indigenous Reentry Forum that's going to be nationally broadcasted. So these are the type of things that we're doing with the Yurok tribe, and hopefully trying to create a task force for other states and other institutions to team up with tribal entities who have, very much been left in the dark in higher ed and in reentry services. We work with an Indigenous recruiter with the American Parole and Probation Association, who for many years had a non-native person working in the parole and burnt a lot of bridges with Indigenous groups around the country. And so what she's doing is trying to clean up that mess and try to put all different reentry opportunities together. And so we've been playing a part in that. We've done 2 events with them. Actually, an old Project Rebound student from San Francisco State is going to be part of that presentation. He's actually from Yurok, lives down in Marin County. And a couple of students of mine are going to be on that presentation, talk about how education has affected their reentry and what types of services that they were expecting that didn't get, or what type of services that parole and probation should be implementing, especially cultural wise. So those are the types of things that we're doing. Hopefully with this partnership, it's very new, just like with CSUN, we became official Project Rebound campus as of October of last year. So we were the newest cohort with CSUN and San Marcos. And so, we're still kind of building this as we're going. But I already see how just Project Rebound being in Humboldt County, how much of an impact it has made, with parole, probation. I had a parole officer the other day call me up and say, they went to San Francisco State for college in the early 90s. And we're aware of Project Rebound. And they called me out of the blue and said, hey, I went to SF State. I know about Project Rebound. What can I do to help? So just the name alone is just super important. One last thing I want to talk about is I work with the staff attorney from the Yurok tribe. And so what we did, we collected a database of all incarcerated Yurok tribal members. There's about 25 from Nevada to Oregon to California that we have that we've been corresponding with, and writing educational goals and plans for them while they've been inside. 3 are about to parole. One was actually a student of my mentor at HSU about 15 years ago. And so we'll just streamline them right in because we've been in that correspondence and Project Rebound is here. So, these programs in place is just so important for, just name recognition alone for the communities that we operate in, just to be aware of. So I just want to say thank you for giving me the space to be here with everyone. It's hard to follow everyone else, so thank you.
Hell no, Tony, you did an excellent job. And then Martine, what you said, we're solution based, and I think if you don't mind, let's just make that the theme of the day. Because what you did, I mean, you talked about that community that you built with the transitions thing. That solution, that was a solution, Tony. You recognized the deficits in the native communities in your surrounding areas, and you got on it. Lily, you recognized that the CSU had some punitive agreements that were in place with the Cal PIA, and you fixed it. And then Gunnar, the stuff you're doing with the healing is huge. That's the solution. Deborah, with the incarceration stuff, is huge. All of that stuff. And then Eric, all the way in Rutgers, the stuff that you did to make sure that formerly incarcerated people were able to be in leadership finally, and not until you had to show your successes, but the fact that you all kept pushing and made that happen. Those are solutions. So I'm glad we came together. I know sometimes this virtual space can be grueling, but I think it did us definitely a positive service today. And Sonny, you're doing the same thing on the solution tip with UNLV. Hopefully we can be a part of your community and continue to help out when we can. But looks like we got a little time. So you wanted to close out with some Q&A. What was the idea, Sonny, you had mentioned?
Yeah, definitely. I want to thank all of you. The personal stories and the information about how you've grown your programs and services has been really inspirational. So we appreciate you doing that. I know that we have a number of UNLV students that are equally excited to talk about campus climate. So that will happen on our third day. So stay tuned, that we'll revisit that and have the opportunity to hear some stories from our own students as well. But yeah, I would like to, we do have some time here. If there are questions that people want to put in the chat, and or honestly, like there's 50 of us on this group, but I think we can handle it. If people want to like unmute themselves and ask their own question, that would be great too. Like we can manage all that in this process. So yeah, looks like Kirk, do you have a question? You want to start?
Yeah, I tell my students that we have the authority to redefine terms and concepts. So I used to think people with the guns and everything were gangsters. Now I see you all as gangsters, especially those who were formerly incarcerated. That's why I said that. And you'll meet me on the third day. I come from an FCI Fort Worth and finishing my PhD, hopefully this summer. Gunnar, I hope you good luck on your master's, and I think you'll make a great professor, and you guys are all just amazing. I have to ask this question. My research is on Black American Muslim males and those who opted out of college. So I went back to my community of Muslims, predominantly Black, many of them probably formerly incarcerated, and I almost had to fight these dudes to come up in these halls and engage these ideas. No one took me up on the offer. What was that? Anybody, I trust anybody, I respect anybody coming from the positions I've heard to respond to that. And let me say this last thing, and Mr. Johnson, I thought about you, because I really believe that they're intimidated or lack the confidence to come up in there, and because I know it was hell for me, but I don't think they'll admit it. So anybody's welcome to answer that question. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just start from my personal experience. Speaking to a group of people when I was incarcerated, you know, they really try to limit how many people could actually, you know, collaborate on the yard. 4 or more was an unauthorized organization. I did all of my academic stuff through correspondence, never got in front of a classroom to speak. And it is intimidating to feel vulnerable. So sometimes just being that gentle nudge, and that's what Project Rebound did for me. We had From Incarceration to Education, the documentary, and Andrew, my boss on campus, Andrew Wynn, asked if I'd moderate the panel discussion. I envisioned it in a classroom, maybe 30 people, and it was in this auditorium with 180 people. And I was totally shaking throughout the whole process, but seeing it kind of just jumping in the water and inviting maybe people in an observational role at first, and then engaging people, I think would be great. It's difficult, it's intimidating. When I first got on campus, I was like Eric said, I was that older guy on campus and a bunch of kids. And I remember I taking a restorative justice class my first year, and we were doing introductions. I just threw it out there. I said, look, I'm formerly incarcerated. I'm the survivor of violent crime, also the perpetrator of violent crime. Put it out there. And these are criminal justice students who are going to be predominantly law enforcement, correctional officers, probation officers, and they embraced me. Like throughout the whole semester, they were really engaging, asked me questions, were inquisitive. And by the end of the semester, I was like the elder statesman in that classroom. And so I just think, sometimes we need a gentle nudge and seeing other people doing it. And that's the mentorship role that we play on campus. We have other people that have gone before us that we can use as a resource and to help build the confidence we may not have when we first step foot on campus.
Okay, appreciate that.
Askia,
Yes.
you mind if I dive in there, or does somebody else have a hand up?
Please, welcome.
I'm just thinking, because so it sounds like you're trying to do research on the reentering community or of Muslims that possibly had incarceration history.
No, that I'm not even considering. I'm looking more at Black males. Sadly, many of them were probably incarcerated, but I'm not even looking at that dynamic. I just want to know their attitudes and perception towards school. because nobody is going into college. It's really not higher learning, and I need to know why. I mean,
But it sounds like it entails some line of questioning.
is that the problem? You know what I mean?
Hey, I mean, I'll speak from a personal framework. I know, well, I'm speaking in addition to mainly the incarcerated folks or folks that maybe some of the ones that are not incarcerated, maybe they've been in the game or something. But oftentimes, you know, with us, it's about question lines of who's questioning me and what are they going to do with this information, number one. And so there's a distrust. Most people historically that have questioned the community, they didn't have the best intentions in mind, you know, on what they were going to do with that information. So, you know, the building that kind of rapport and understanding of what the possible benefit for the people that you're inquiring about might be a little part of the problem.
But Professor Bell, at the same time, I'm part of this community. I'm not an outsider, I'm an insider. So we do everything together, but we can't go up in these halls. That, you know, we gonna pray, we gonna eat, we gonna laugh, joke, whatever we do. But we're not gonna go get degrees. No, none of us. I think it's what Mr. Johnson said. I think many of us lack the confidence. Now they're saying, this is our professor, great job, hold on. But you'll hear about that the third day. But I you know, I don't think the community can sustain itself. It can't. Without somebody going to school, you'll be dependent. But that's what, and I'm just saying, I didn't get no takers. You know, nobody considered it. You know, and the last thing I'll share with you really quick, I have a student of mine who just got out. He's a student, the semester's over, and he called me and he didn't live up to it. And I said, now I'm gonna see if you're a gangster. You know, I know what you tried to do. I know you tried to take a full load. I know you had a family. I know, but don't quit. You know, and now you see why these guys not going up in these halls. They don't want to deal with that. They don't want to deal with that. You know, not so much the questions, and I think you're right. However, the engagement, the civic engagement, all that, you know, comfortable. They're comfortable in that environment. But I know it was tough for me. But so I was really looking to see if anybody got that type of resistance when these programs came into these facilities. Because I go into these counties, and I mean, those are where the sharpest minds are, to me. As we say, brilliant minds.
That's a bunch of, you're gonna have to kind of prove and convince, looks like a community, that it's a viable solution to some of those issues.
I like
And
that.
you know, that's not gonna happen overnight, maybe if it's not something that's normal for the area. But we
I
can
like
work
that.
on it though. Don't give up on them.
No.
Jason, if I can go ahead and say one thing about that.
Oh, yeah.
Professor Labor.
When I hear you ask the question about Black Muslim folks in education and coming to the campus, this is reflective to a lot of groups throughout our society. You know, Chicano males or gang members, Muslims, LGBTQ, trans folks, like there's these subcultures and subgroups in society that are oftentimes were marginalized by the exact institution you want to get them involved with, right? I talk about this when I'm inviting every semester, every summer, I invite 25 to 30 new formerly incarcerated individuals into this cohort model of education. And a lot of them that I recruit to say that place isn't for me because they've got a distrust with the institution.
Yes.
Right. And we have to become reflective of what we want them to see. As a Chicano scholar and a professor, they can see themselves at the institution because of me, right? Or because we have this lived experience. And so we have to really, schools talk about equity, they talk about cultural proficiency, they talk about all these big theory stuff. But for me, talk is cheap because action speaks louder than words. So if we're not action-based with why they should be in the institution, they're not going to trust it. right? I mean, I think that a lot of times for some of the folks I recruit, their neighborhoods, their families, their communities, those are the safest place they're going to be, because they don't feel judged or marginalized in those already marginal communities. Academic institutions pass judgment and discrimination, and we have to talk about that, right? I mean, I've had professors, welcome my identities, my intersectional identities. I've also had professors who could care less, or professors who didn't trust when I said, oh yeah, I shared a paper that I wrote, maybe I'm formerly incarcerated, I spent time in prison. All of a sudden the professor started treating me differently for speaking my truth. I didn't feel like going back to that professor's class, right? So we have to actually build an institution that completely welcomes folks and puts in place the people that invites them in, right? And I think that's the long goal on this one, right? That all campuses and universities that we're put in praxis, right? We're doing this work. We aren't just speaking words, but we're doing action. We're creating action about this stuff, right? And I think that we need to, I think that education needs to gain the trust of the people they pushed out in the first place, right? And it's not just the education, the K through 12, the community colleges and universities, but it's also the communities and even family members, right? I mean, I often talk about the LGBTQ community. A lot of LGBTQ folks are pushed out of their own families for coming out. How are they going to feel about society?
They got a large homeless community.
Right, yeah, a large homeless veteran community. Talk about Black Muslim men, that's another subculture that's marginalized, right? And so we need to really build communities in education that one sees them, accepts them, and that their intersections are completely welcome and empowered in these spaces. So
I say this, and I do push back to them and say, but you claim to be a gangster. So you comfortable with walking in a room with guns, with people you don't know, versus going up into the halls. You got to think about that. Mr. Turner?
Yes, if I may add, it's very powerful what both of you have contributed. But historically, it's been my experience to see that certain organizations have been criminalized, and to step out into the mainstream society, maybe subconsciously or consciously, they feel as if they're targeted. The other thing that I think is important is that when we talk about gangsterism, you see a lot of gangsterism in financially challenged neighborhoods. If you don't live next door to a doctor or a lawyer, you'll see somebody making a living in the streets any way they can to support their family. Some call it gangsterism and some call it survival. Whereas on the other hand, you don't see college graduates isn't modeled as easily. They're not as visible in our communities. So it's going to take time in order, this is my belief, it's going to take time in order to change that picture. And we're living examples that it can happen. And I do like your approach that you're challenging them somewhat, as, because the prison pipeline and the prison culture, usually when you challenge somebody, that make them step up. They're not going to back down from a challenge, but I like the approach that you challenge them to acquire higher education, but also feel that it's going to take some time for them to become comfortable enough to gradually increase the numbers on campus. And then once they acquire that education, come back to the communities and provide that model and the source of education within the community, and show them, better than tell them is my approach, show them that it can be done.
It's key. In closing out on that tip, it's generational shift. And man, if you let them know, you got some folks, some family members now that'll talk to them. That's generational change that you're talking about. And it, like George was saying, it could take some time, but it is possible.
I can't wait to tell them about this experience here. And I appreciate all of you.
And I want to acknowledge, I think that Deborah put some really great thoughts in the chat too. And one of the challenges I think for higher education is that we tend to leave it to those that are oppressed to attempt to change the oppressive system. And there probably needs to be more people that are stepping up and saying like, hey, we need to address how higher education operates in order for it to actually be more inclusive. So I recognize we're after our official time for this institute, which is actually something I was anticipating that we would, each day run out of time because there's such amazing topics and so much to share. But we hope to see everyone back tomorrow between 10 and noon for day 2 of the Institute. Our topics tomorrow are admissions and financial aid, academic advising and mentoring, and career development. I know those are functions that many of the UNLV participants have responsibilities related to on campus. And one of the things that's been challenging for those of us that have started to say to UNLV justice impacted students of like, hey, we're here to help you. And then sometimes we get a question and we're like, that's a great question. I don't know what the answer is. So I think a little bit, we're kind of like, hey, there's, a number of things where now that we've opened this door and said we want to create this space where we're like, oh, now we need to figure out what the answers to all these questions are. So we're super excited for day 2. We want to thank all of those of you that presented today and taking time to be with us. It's been a great first day of the Institute. I've seen some amazing engagement. So thanks to everyone, and we'll see everyone tomorrow.
Thank you for having us. See you tomorrow morning.
Thank you, everyone.